John mentioned it there, and thank you for your service, John. Today is September 11th, and you remember it's hard not to. As I was driving to the train station this morning, I was thinking about when I was driving that day in 2001 to work in the 5 a.m. hour, and I was working at a news talk station, and I walked in at 5:30 in the morning, and then I remember our newsman saying, a plane just hit the World Trade Center. Yep. And I remember saying to him, like, we're in Los Angeles, and I was like, and I was in a bad mood, shocking, I know. And I go, like, who cares? It's in New York City. Like, it was probably a prop plane, whatever.
Right.
And then he said, no, you should come see this. I think it was a big plane. And him and I watched together in his newsroom the second plane hit the second tower.
Yep.
And just remember, and a lot of our audience now was very young on 2001 or wasn't even born yet. I get it. And some of us have seemed to have forgotten overall. And the world is a crazy place now. There's a lot of crazy stuff that happens. But just take a moment to think about the men and women that day that went to work and never came home.
Yeah. Hey, I'm glad you started there because, I wanted today, I'm going to call a quick timeout. I wanted today to be very conscious of why people tune in, Chris, Sua, Greg, Lindsay, Jorge. I really wanted to be conscious of why people tune into 710. You know, people always say sports radio, it's an escape. If I want all the real news, I can go over there and I can find the real news. And I've always been a person who feels like, we should probably really incorporate the real news because that's what people are talking about. But I also now have a different philosophy, which is let's try and avoid all the bad news. I honestly, just a quick side note, I didn't know who Charlie Kirk was until yesterday, but I'll put that off to the side. September 11th, my entire life meant my mother's birthday. So happy birthday to Mom. But it's hard to believe that it's been 24 years. Now, Chris, you were talking about driving in. I was sitting in a radio studio in San Diego, Extra Sports 690 back then, and it's 5 and change, and we're getting ready to go on the air at 6. And I come on the air right at the top of the 6 o'clock hour, and I go, hey, welcome to the show. There's a weird news story happening in New York. A plane hit the World Trade Center. We don't know any information about it. And just like you, Chris, I thought it was a small plane and it was probably an accident. And then on live television, you see the second plane hit the second tower. And I actually said to my radio partner, they must have video surveillance replay. And he goes, no, that was a second plane. As soon as the second plane hit, I think, and I get goosebumps talking about it, I think we all realized in that moment, we as America are under attack. And I can remember then we handed off. We go, okay, listen, we're not going to be able to do the show today. We're going to hand off to our news talk station. And then we went all news talk. And I remember saying, because there were about 20 guys sitting in the studio watching this on old 27-inch Zenith square box TVs. I said to my radio partner, I go, how are they going to get up there and fix those buildings?
Right.
And then within a matter of moments, both of those buildings came flying down. And, oh, by the way, I had just moved from New York City to Southern California in April of 2001. So I was like on the phone with people trying to find out if people were okay and if they'd gotten out of the area. So it is 24 years. It is so hard to believe how fast time has gone by. And, Sue, I'm wondering from your perspective, as a guy who's 30 years old, and who was a little kid when this all happened, what do you think on a day like today? Because for me, I can't help but think of all that has happened in my life / in the world in 24 years. But you were a little kid back then. I was consumed watching it all day, every day,
No, I was 7 years old, and I was in first grade, I believe, first or second grade. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I was in Rialto getting ready to walk to school in the morning, to Curtis Elementary School, and I remember going into the living room where my dad would be watching, sports or the news before he'd, make us breakfast. And I remember him just staring at the screen and not talking to any of us when we walked into the living room. And me and my brothers and sisters are all looking around saying, what's wrong, Dad? And he says, you guys aren't going to school today. Come sit down on the couch. And we sat down on the couch and just see buildings on fire. And my dad said that, you just witnessed your first terrorist attack. That's when my dad broke it to us as a 7-year-old. I'm not understanding what's going on, but we didn't go to school that day, and just remember on the news, just seeing the smoke coming from the buildings before they collapsed. And, that first real taste of, war on U.S. soil for Americans. It's crazy to digest because we're so numb to things due to social media and what we see every day. But when stuff happens in your backyard, in your territory where you feel safest, it's a wake-up call for sure.
It really is. And I guess for me, I keep saying, 24 years and all the things that happened. after 9/11, and Rudy Giuliani, who was the mayor of New York at that time, he was considered very heroic. He's walking the streets, and the firefighters are trying to tear through, and the cops and first responders, and Giuliani was kind of the face guy. And then President Bush, as you recall, showed up in New York City, and he was standing there with that old firefighter, and he had that megaphone, and he said something like, the people who did this, they'll hear from us soon. And there was a real rally in America that, we were attacked. Because, of course, it wasn't just the Twin Towers. Then it's what happened in the state of Pennsylvania. It's what happened at the Pentagon. And, Sue, I'll just advance this story by telling you this, that probably, so that was 2001, probably in 2002-ish, I had the opportunity to fly from North Island, which is, a Navy base in San Diego, and I flew on what's called a COD plane. And this plane took off from North Island and landed on an aircraft carrier. And I want to say it was the USS Abraham Lincoln. I'm almost sure. We landed on an aircraft carrier, and I spent 2 nights on that aircraft carrier with Donnie Edwards, who was then a San Diego Charger, and a couple other San Diego Chargers. And the reason we were out there was to just kind of shake hands with the Navy, the sailors, and so on. And President Bush landed an F-18, not that he was flying it, but he was sitting in the back, and he landed on an aircraft carrier. And the Navy and the sailors, they were going crazy because the next night, as the aircraft carrier was pulling back into San Diego, he had a big sign behind him that said "Mission Accomplished." And he gave this speech that the entire world was watching. But as we know, things went on for another 20 years after he thought the mission was accomplished. So, man, it brings back all these crazy memories. And it's interesting to hear that you were a 7-year-old kid and what your memories were back then. Chrissy, how about you, man? I mean, what besides just that 5 a.m. going in, being in a bad mood, and going into a news talk station, what else do you you think about?
I spent 2 days straight on that at that news talk station. I didn't go home, and that was back. There was no East Central Hotel like back then for me at that station like there is now. So it was very surreal because obviously being a news talk, everybody was all over it, and we were a news talk station that really. We dove in on the story, and I was the first imaging guy in the country to put the USA on a legal ID. Mm-hmm. So it was Glendale, Los Angeles, USA, and you felt that pride of everybody. And listen, a lot has changed since then, and I remember being proud of all the flags in the neighborhood, and I still wave a flag in my house. Cappy, you've been to my house. You see there's a lot of flags up. And listen, it's a day we will never forget, and it's funny because I mentioned to Stephanie last night, 9/11 is usually a day that I watch, and it's the same documentaries every year. Yep. And, of course, Lindsay's a big documentary person, so am I. I watch the same 9/11 documentaries every year that are on Nat Geo and all the different channels that will run them. But tonight, I won't be able to watch them because tonight's Thursday Night Football. So we got to watch Thursday Night Football. And it's it's just an interesting time to see, to think that was so long ago, but so many moments of it feel like just yesterday.
I know. Bergie, how about you, man? What do you recall? What do you think about 9/11?
So I was a freshman at Colorado Boulder, and we were out there watching it on the TV in our dorm room. But I had a roommate that was from New York, and so all the phone lines are down. So him being a 18, 19-year-old kid at Colorado Boulder, away from his family, trying to get in touch with everybody in his family, he wasn't able to. And so to see him going through this process of watching what's happening on the screen, trying to get a hold of his family, can't get a hold of him, it was really tough to watch. I mean, he was devastated for quite a long time. He was a jovial, happy guy that made a ton of jokes, and then as this went on for the weeks and weeks and weeks, just was a lot lower. We didn't have it wasn't in that space anymore. So it was really tough to watch someone that was trying to deal with it firsthand, but also from so far away. Yeah, it was tough.
I know. I had one of my best friends who was there at the World Trade Center, and I remember finally getting a hold of him, and he had ridden his motorcycle from the Upper East Side of New York all the way down to the World Trade Center. And when the second plane hit and everybody realized, wow, we're under attack, he left. He wasn't in one of the Twin Towers. He was in one of the other buildings around, and he started walking up towards the uptown, and just running essentially away from the smoke, the flames, the sirens, the craziness that was going on, just to try and get himself to safety. But unfortunately, thousands of other Americans did not make it that day. And so I'll just say this. Today, I happen to be, for those of you that are watching on YouTube, I'm wearing my All-American Sunday swagger. I know we don't celebrate today as if it were the 4th of July, but we do say on September 11th, never forget. And in a world right now where there's so much political unrest and there's so much mishigas out there, Christopher. Yep, today is a day that, again, with everything that happened yesterday and how it – Sue, I saw your tweet yesterday about what happened. And again, I said it. I didn't know who this gentleman was until yesterday, but then I got caught up in hours of coverage of what took place yesterday on that college campus in Utah. So we're living in a crazy world right now, but let's never forget what happened on 9/11. To all of our service members out there, men and women, thank you for your service. To all of our first responders, we thank you guys for your service. And I'm consciously now, after I got all that off my chest, let's go back to sports and entertainment.
Sports and entertainment.